So Canada often imagines itself as one of the biggest champions around the world for queer and trans communities, and that's not fully wrong. We are one of the safest countries for queer and trans people. But hate is rising here as well. We've seen a rise for the last 3 years in police-reported hate-motivated violence targeting our communities.
Hate crimes targeting queer Canadians are the highest they've been at in 5 years.
And so we often get this narrative of Canadian exceptionalism, this imagination that we're so good, that can often act as a smokescreen that makes it easier for us to ignore ongoing realities of social and economic and political exclusion, of shame, of stigma, hate, and violence that continue to impact queer and trans people in this country. I have a spotlight on my back painted on my back from anti-gender and anti-progress organizations and activists. And it means that almost every day I wake up to horrible messages on social media. There are pictures of me, there are memes made about me, and all of that does take its toll. But what keeps me going is recognizing the space that we've carved out for the next generation, and knowing that when I do this work, when I take punches from anti-rights groups, those are punches that aren't being put on our young queer and trans people. And seeing the joy on their faces, seeing the space that they have to figure out who they are without having to unlearn quite as much as I and many in my generation have had to, that is what keeps me going more than anything else. A lot of queer and trans people grow up in environments where we're not taught to love ourselves, where our identities, our experiences are stigmatized, and that takes root deep inside of us as human beings. And if you add to that an all too familiar reality where when we access health and social services, homophobia and transphobia can show up in those spaces too, it makes it a lot harder for members of our community to reach out for help when they need it, because their own issues and isms are making it more difficult, and then when they encounter discrimination in services, they're less likely to go back. All of which creates circumstances where our communities are more likely to struggle with mental health, with well-being, and not to be able to access the supports and to meet the basic needs that we need when we're in crisis. Through some of the hate that I've received, one of the biggest things that's kept me going is messages from parents of trans and gender diverse kids, messages from those young folks themselves thanking me for my work, but also recognizing that this work allows for more space for our young people again to be themselves. And that's really, it's a complicated struggle, but that's really all that we're asking for at the end of the day. Space to be proud of ourselves and to walk in safety. I think this Pride Month and this year more than any is a time for us to be protecting pride, but as we fight this rising hate, we can't let ourselves only live in the doom and gloom. I think we're talking more and more in community about trans joy and queer joy, and taking time to recognize how far we've come, taking time to celebrate all that queer and trans people, from artists to activists to writers to people working in factories, all that they have to offer our communities. And so my message this Pride season is to love yourself and love this joyful community we're part of.